I'm Melanie Schaper, and this is Mel on the Street, where we dive into what's actually happening behind the story and not just the headline. And today I'm joined by Max Porterfield, CEO of Visionary Copper and Gold. Thank you so much for joining me, Max.
Thanks so much for having me today.
So I always like to start with the big picture. Copper and gold have both been attracting attention recently, but for very different reasons. From where you sit, where are the major trends shaping the sector today, and where do you think investors are most focused right now?
Well, I think gold's always taken the focus. More recently, gold's had a spectacular move when it broke through 2,000, going up past 5,000, is now settling around the $4,000 level, which is a strong base, and I think it'll strengthen from there. What hasn't gained investors' focus as much, which I think is going to gain a lot more attention going forward, is certainly in the copper space. Copper's had a very strong run from the lows of $2 a pound to about 6.35 today per pound. And then this is on the backdrop of when you had a real lack of investment in exploration for the previous 10 to 15 years. Yeah, in copper, you've got declining grade profiles across the board with existing mines and mines being depleted. And then on that's all on the supply side. And then on the demand front, you've got robust demand from infrastructure spending, AI, obviously construction of homes, all those type of things demand electricity. Electric vehicles are much more dependent on copper. Again, copper is a sleeper overall. I think in terms of generalist investors' attention right now, it's a real opportunity moving forward. And just to end with that, I mean, the world's going to need to mine 700 million tons of copper in the next 25 years, which is equivalent to all the copper mined in human history combined. And I think that's kind of sets the stage for a significant move higher in the copper space in particular.
And so if we talk specifically about Visionary for investors who may be hearing about the company for the first time, can you walk us through your key projects and what attracted the company to those opportunities in the first place?
Well, with Visionary, we really saw this move coming a long time ago. We built a portfolio of copper and gold rich assets within key Canadian mining jurisdictions. When you're in these key Canadian mining jurisdictions, you have a lot of that infrastructure in place with access, which is oftentimes your upfront capital cost is really dependent on infrastructure costs and proximity to that infrastructure, as well as you have existing permitting regimes and existing workforces in these areas. So with that being said, we're advancing a gold, copper, zinc, silver rich deposit in the province of Newfoundland called Point Leamington. It's a sizable resource that exists today within a pit constrained resource. We're looking from an open pit perspective where you've got 500,000 ounces of gold, 170 million pounds of copper, 700 million pounds of zinc, and 8 million ounces of silver. And we've just hit an adjacent discovery next to it that we were named Kraken, which is a copper rich zone near surface where we see significant resource growth. And then beyond that, we've expanded our land package on a regional basis where we'll be following up targets that were previously advanced and developed by BHP or previously Billiton when they previously explored the property and haven't been followed up since. And beyond that, we've got some of the highest grade copper deposit called Rainbow outside of a little town called Flin Flon, Manitoba, here in Canada as well. That's in close proximity to existing rail lines and access that we're advancing through permitting. So we're advancing on multiple fronts across portfolio of tier one jurisdiction here in Canada, where we've got existing resources that we're growing significantly with a focus in Newfoundland.
Is I want to take a minute to talk specifically about copper. The copper demand forecast has become a major talking point, driven by everything from electrification and data centers and AI to renewable energy. How do you think about those long-term demand trends, and do you think that influences how Visionary prioritizes its projects and the capital allocation?
Yes, certainly. So when I took over management of Visionary, dating back to 2014, we stated very clearly that our medium-term focus that we liked was zinc, but copper was long-term. And so, with that being said, we started with a portfolio in Manitoba of early exploration stage assets that we've now made discoveries on. Grow those discoveries, which I mentioned was named a Rainbow, was one of them, and which we're now advancing through permitting, which is close to this small town. What we also did in terms that was really ahead of the curve is we acquired a portfolio of these deposits in Eastern Canada, New Brunswick, where we have a sizable zinc, lead, silver deposit that we advanced to a preliminary economic assessment in the medium term. And then in Newfoundland, our Point Leamington deposit, we again acquired at the bottom of the metal cycle in 2016, and then have been advancing the portfolio. And as we shift over to Newfoundland, we see an opportunity to significantly grow the resource base near surface with a focus on copper. And again, you have that supporting permitting regime of Newfoundland. You've got the workforce, hydroelectric power, and export to foreign markets within 45 minutes of the deposit. So everything's ideally situated, but you want to be acquiring these assets and the portfolio of assets when they're unloved, which was certainly the case when you look back to when we acquired them in 2016. So I have been at the company over 12 years now. And we take a long-term vision of when we execute across the portfolio, and that's kind of how we've done it leading up to this move that we're having right now. A lot of people want to chase a move, but really to catch a wave, if you're surfing, you want to be paddling before the wave gets there, so you're prepared to ride it, and that's certainly the case here at Visionary.
Yeah, and you mentioned the projects and some of the opportunities that you've seen. Looking back, like more specifically, looking back over the last year, what would you consider the most important developments for the company? So, if you could give me five, say, and what should investors be paying attention to in the year ahead?
Yeah, certainly. So over the last year, we shifted actually to the Point Leamington deposit for the first time, which is the first exploration that has been conducted on the deposit in over 20 years. And with that, that was very successful. Our phase one exploration expanded the strike or the extent of the deposit to the south, outside the resource boundaries near surface. But the real storyline of the past year is the discovery called Kraken. A lot of these major systems can have a feeder system that's even larger than the known deposit itself, and that's something that's been more realized over the past 25 years. And that's what Kraken represents, is potential for a significant copper-rich endowment adjacent to the existing resource that we've just discovered, where we've hidden some really wide intervals over 73 meters, for example, in one interval of 0.45% copper, which is, certainly the grades you'd be looking to see from an open pit perspective, which we're advancing this. So that's the biggest successes over the past 12 months. And I said I should mention also the expansion of the land package at Point Leamington, because these deposits occur in clusters. Point Leamington is the only known deposit to have occurred. And when we expanded the land package, as I mentioned before, we encompassed some new ground that was previously explored by Billiton, now BHP. And they had the same opinion that we do at the area, is that they saw an opportunity to make another discovery like Port Leamington. And that's what we're long-term vision as we move forward, is to continue to execute on expanding the discovery in Kraken, which is at, again, wide intervals of copper hitting near surface immediately adjacent to the existing 43101 resource, but then also hit a new discovery or more on the regional land package as we follow up to the work that uh, BHP did when they previously explored the property up until 2001, and no one has followed up. And so that's really the next 12 months, is expanding the new discovery at Kraken to upgrade the resource and then continue forward to economic studies in the future. But before then, we want to hit new discoveries and drill those out too, which is what these regional opportunities. And across the portfolio in Manitoba, again, we've got a very high grade copper discovery or deposit called Rainbow. It's over 3% copper. The average mine grade of copper around the world is less than half a percent. So it's a very, very high grade copper deposit there. And we're advancing it through the permitting process. The final permit you need to go into production there is an Environmental Act license, which we're going to be looking to submit that application for later this year. So again, we're addressing the long lead items and preparing for an eventual production decision there in Manitoba, while we're advancing the Newfoundland asset with the drill bit very aggressively, with growing the resource space and hitting new discoveries.
So, in terms of you mentioned a bit about the drilling and the exploration strategy. What's the timeline? What can investors be looking for in terms of
Well,
timing?
we have boots on the ground right now regionally. So right now we're actually advancing a soil sampling campaign over those 5 different target areas that I've mentioned that were advanced by BHP. So we've got that ongoing right now. We just started that in the last couple weeks. As that concludes, we'll be looking to transition to a phase two drilling, and that'll again proceed in late August, early September timeframe, and then that will be consistent drilling uh, over the next really 12 months, with maybe a short break next, spring. So it's again, when we get drilling on a new discovery, it takes a lot of drill holes to drill out that discovery, and that's when you can get a big revaluation in the stock. We've already seen a significant rise in our share price based upon the results from phase one, as well as our expansion and our ongoing work there. And we're looking to grow even further as we continue to outline the new discovery and then make new discoveries on a regional basis later this year.
So can you talk a little bit about the metrics and the milestones, the developments even that you believe are the most important in assessing the progress? What should investors be looking for in terms of the data that comes back?
Well, as my dad always tells me is drill, baby, drill. So the drill results are what drives the discoveries. Drill results what drives markets, and that's where you get major wealth creation that you can't really get many places in the capital markets outside of the exploration business, and that's the most exciting part. We've de-risked it already with a number of holes. We've got 8 holes already into Kraken, and now each additional hole that we put into Kraken will continue to expand and further define that. And I should also mention where we can currently upgrading the confidence in the existing resource simultaneously. So those drill results are really gonna be the key driver moving forward over the next 12 months. And then all the other cursory work that we're doing with the soil camps, sampling results from the field, different permitting milestones, those type of things will feed into that. But again, the old 80/20 and the 80 is going to be coming from the drill results at Point Leamington in Newfoundland.
Yeah, is there anything that you think investors are overlooking about the strategy at Visionary?
Well, really, the company's been overlooked as we transitioned to Newfoundland. When we first transitioned to Newfoundland, it kinda came out of left field for many investors because we were known really for our very high-grade discoveries, in Manitoba. But given the permitting timelines in Manitoba have been were extended, and given our long-term vision and our opportunity when we needed to make that move, to Newfoundland, that's something that's been overlooked. The Newfoundland asset was really a sleeper asset because I remind you, we acquired that asset at the bottom of the metal cycle over a decade ago when no one cared about these metals. And so assets and within companies can be overlooked from the capital markets perspective until the company brings into the fold and begins exploring them and developing them. And that's something that we didn't do in Newfoundland until this past year. And that's why you can see we've gotten a lot of increased investor interest. And when I say that, the share prices perform rather well as investors are starting to understand the potential in Newfoundland. And really, it's just the beginning for us, I believe, quite strongly.
And just finally, before we wrap up, what do you think the overall market is telling investors about these commodities, and how do you think that may or may not affect the share price at Visionary?
Well, the overall market, we were certainly in a hyperinflationary environment. And not to go too off a tangent on that. And then you've got key drivers that are also simultaneously driving those metals. And a big thing that happened is the rerouting of trade globally based upon recent negotiations out of the United States administration and how they've really viewed metals. And I think one of the biggest things is the world's finally waking up. Oil has always been viewed very strategically by the Western world, oil and gas. Obviously, we rely on it very heavily. What has been overlooked in the Trump administration in the United States has done a great job of making everyone pay close attention to these things is mine supply and how critical mine supply is. Quite frankly, before his administration took over, I don't believe the term critical mineral existed. And now you can see it's critical in more ways than one. And this is the new era uh, for commodities and the metals in particular. I liken copper as the new oil because it's moving the world in transportation in ways that oil used to historically do. And it's got other demand drivers like AI data centers and all these are very, very key and strategic. And as countries look at their mine supply in a strategic nature, being in a tier one jurisdiction like Canada, where you've got a rule of law, you're in North America, there's permitting regimes that have been in place for long standing, and then you also have the workforce that can take those the metals out of the ground, really position Canada and Visionary to stand out in this unique opportunity on a global basis.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Max.
Thanks so much for having me again.
And thanks to everyone for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more episodes of Mill on the Street.